Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Jason Buffington with Veeam. My esteemed colleague Dave Russell has the week off, so instead we got an upgrade in the form of Dustin Albertson. Dustin, thank you for joining me this morning.
Hey, no problem. Happy to be here.
Dustin, give us 30 seconds on I have advertised about you all week. Looking forward to this. You are a cloudy human. Tell us what that means.
Sure, no problem. So I am the manager of cloud and applications for product management alliances at Veeam. What that means is I control and run all the cloud alliances from a relationship standpoint. But prior to that, I was a VCSP SA. I've worked for cloud providers. I've worked for service providers. Long story short, I'm a cloudy person. It goes deep.
Awesome. A cloudy human. So what I thought we'd do, and by the way, Dustin, where are you calling in from this morning?
Yes, so I'm in Greenville, South Carolina.
South Carolina. You do have a little bit of that Southern gentleman twang coming from behind. And we do want to find out where everyone else is coming from as well. So I am from the great state of Texas. We have South Carolina in the house. We've got Georgia. Our producer, Mark. We've got, let's see. Well, light up the map. Tell us where you're from along the way. All right, so with that, let's get right into this. And while people are first chiming in on the map, we want to talk about the moving landscape, if you will, of cloud. I want to go ahead and bring up slide number 1. And we actually brought up a couple slides that Dave and I used at the very beginning of the year, but both of us just pretend to be cloudy humans. So now that we have a real cloudy human, I want to get some new responses on this. So this first chart, this is from Veeam's massive data protection trends report. This last year, we had 3,000 respondents overall that surveyed for that. And for those who haven't seen this particular chart before, it's one of my favorites. We asked in 2020, that's the darkest green on the left-hand side, we asked organizations what percentage of their servers were physical in the left-hand side versus virtual in the middle of the screen versus cloud hosted on the right-hand side. So as a snapshot, pun intended, 38% of servers were physical, 30% in the middle left were virtual, and 32% were cloud hosted, either hyperscale or on a regional service provider. Now in 2020, we also asked folks, what do you think it's going to be 2 years later? Which is that yellowy green. And so you see, you kind of skip one to see the 2022 anticipated data. Well, that was a year and a half ago. Earlier this year, the DPR 21 data also asked the question, that's that darkest green, 29% on the left-hand side. And then what they thought it was going to be 2 years later, which is the tealish of the 4 at 24. So I think it tells 3 really interesting stories. Let me unpack this really quick, and then Dustin, I want to hear from your thoughts because you have several different cloud perspectives. Let's look at this. So basically, what people thought their physical servers were going to look like was about 38%, and over the next 2 years, they thought it would get down the yellowy part, which is 29. But we know COVID, quarantine, you couldn't get in the data center, right? So for all those reasons, a lot of cloud IT modernization initiatives accelerated. What they thought they were going to get in 2 years, they actually got in 1. They got that 29% in the darkish green in year 1, and they think it's going to go even further down to about 24%. So basically, it's a gradual decline of the percentage of servers that are physical. Virtual tells a little bit different story. Basically, you can see there's 2 pairings that are flat, right? That it was at 30. They thought it was going to stay at 30. No, it's actually at 23, but they think it's going to go to 24. So roughly flat. And then those net sum gains on the right-hand side. They thought it was going to be 32 going towards 41. Actually, we're at 47 and we're going to 52. And I love that last nugget because going from 47 to 52 means it's a majority. Right? You're crossing that 50% mark, thinking that more than half of your servers are going to be cloud hosted. Now, we've got a little bit of data to share where that is otherwise, but that gradual movement, and I don't think anyone at Veeam is saying the data center is dead. All brick and mortar raised floor is going to go away. But Dustin, from your perspective, as both a service provider history as well as what you do when you're partnering with our friends at Amazon and Azure and others, what's your reaction to this? And what should people be thinking about as they're thinking about what workload should land where?
Okay, so my first reaction is that I love it, right? So from a cloud perspective, we always talk about, the cloud is this, cloud is that. It's the most important thing. It's been a hot topic for it seems like years now, right? So, but what I mean is I like this data because it does actually show, that stuff is happening, and stuff is moving towards the cloud. So this is something that I can leverage to kind of show that migration. But with that short, I think nobody can say that COVID, or nobody can deny that COVID kind of expedited this process. It's made us more important for just the remote aspect of it, the remote workers, home workers, a lot of people who never worked remotely are now working remotely. Right. It's kind of exacerbated this process, right?
That's fair. So, one of the things when I first saw this data that was kind of alarming for me is, does this mean the data center is dying? Right. And I say that with a little bit of hyperbole and exaggeration. But if we could ask the producers, let's go to slide 2 for just a second. I want to look on the left-hand side of slide 2, because one of the things that actually was kind of heartening for me was it would be easy to look at that first chart and just see physical virtual cloud and think it's a net sum zero gain, meaning that servers were always being migrated. And that's actually not the case. Right. So when we look on that left-hand side data, we did ask in the 2021 data, where did your servers come from? Right. It's like, you ask, mommy and daddy in the cloud, where do cloudy servers come from? And only about 60% were migrated from physical or virtual infrastructure in the data center. The other 40% were just stood up. And in my mind, this kind of validates a cloud first, but not a cloud only strategy. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, a lot of this is, in my mind, is modernization, right? We've talked about modernizing IT for a while, and that's kind of what it is. Is it's a lot easier to develop in the cloud or develop a cloud first strategy moving forward than trying to revamp all this old, thick server, fat client type applications, trying to modernize that, right?
Sure.
So that's what I take from it is that, like you say, a lot of people are starting, hey, from this moment forward, anything new is going to be cloud first. Anything old, we'll let it either age out or we'll update it to be cloud first.
Let's follow that track for a second, and let's bring up slide 3. And this one we might actually want to spend some time on, because I want you to kind of from your solutions architect days, so for those that don't know, when our marquee accounts at Veeam or large enterprises, when they're really looking at deploying Veeam universally, or when there's a complex architecture to be done, that's when we bring in a Veeam solutions architect. And these are maybe not Dustin, but the rest of them are some of the sharpest minds that we have with just for fun, at Veeam, to help them understand, there's not always a perfect fit. You're going to use technologies differently. Let's talk about slide number 3 for a second, because slide 3, the question was, what are the determinants for when a workload should run cloud host versus on-prem? Now, notice it does not say, the top one is cost. It does not say the cloud is cheaper. Right. The second one down on security does not say the cloud is more secure. This is not a comparison between the two, but this is a stack ranking of what are the factors that come into play when choosing whether workloads should be cloud hosted versus on-prem. And I'd make the case that every one of these, there's two sides to every coin. I'd really love for you to unpack these for us, Dustin. When someone says, hey, cost is my number one determinant, what are the things that drive costs either side of that consideration?
Yeah, good point. So if someone said to me, cost is my number one determinant, I'd probably reply back to them that you're doing it wrong, right? Like, so if you're setting off to the cloud because you think it's going to be cheaper, that's one thing. But the flexibility is usually what they mean by cost, right? So I can develop an app, I can rack things up, I can ramp them down a lot easier and more cost effective in the cloud than I could on-prem, where I have to buy the traditional licensing and servers and all of that. So that's usually what people are referring to. But I would agree that the costing is important, but it shouldn't be the primary reason for for setting off a cloud voyage.
That's fair. Let's go through the list. So we see here so dark green is when someone could choose any one of them, and so using cost as the example for the purposes of the chart, 66%. So two-thirds of organizations that were surveyed, cost was one of their determining factors as to whether it goes in the cloud or not. The yellowish green, that's when you can only pick one. And for a third of organizations, 34%, cost was the primary driver. So when is cloud more expensive and when is cloud less expensive when you're trying to measure that, regardless of where it fits in the stack?
Yeah. So cloud is more expensive when because of that flexibility, but it's more expensive when you try to squeeze an on-prem workload into a cloud-based design. That's when it gets to be more expensive. And what I mean by flexibility there is that I can spin up as many instances or services as I need just to test something out. But if I'm not actively checking those, making sure that they're being shut down, making sure that I have redundancy, all these different factors, then it becomes a kind of sprawl issue, and my costing is going to ramp up, dramatically.
Okay. I'll give you a second to look at the other ones in the list. Let's take a look at the map really quick. So let's see. So we've got a pretty good list going so far. So France is in the house. Slovenia is in the house. India, Kenya. Love that. So over in the U.S., we've got looks like California on the left. Ohio. Always good to see some folks. It's probably some of our friends from the Columbus office, if I'm honest about it. Let's see where else we got, folks. South Africa. You can almost always count out on friends from South Africa joining, so thank you for that. And then Brazil. I got to admit, it's always a trade up for me. Two of my favorite places, actually three of my favorite places to travel, are all on this list. Love South Africa. Fantastic meat, fantastic wine, and the safaris aren't bad either. Brazil. Fantastic meat, fantastic wine. There's a trend going there. Singapore's in the house. Amazing food in Singapore as well, though they don't really have grapes. So, well, 2 out of 3. But yeah, so please keep the countries going. I tell you, the one thing I truly miss after 16 months of quarantine, the amazing foods around the world. I cannot wait to get back on a plane and go spend some time with friends. So, all right. Yeah, please keep piling on, and we're going to keep calling out the countries as they go. Let's get back to when does one use the cloud? For this next one, actually, let's do this. Let's go to slide 4, and then we'll come back to this list, because I think it's interesting when we looked at slide 4. I'm a negative person more than I am a positive in some cases. And so we asked organizations that were using the cloud in production, we asked them, what benefits have you gotten from using public scale cloud on the left? And then what were the challenges on the right? And I think it's interesting, connectivity and security. I will tell you, Dustin, you gave me actually minor credentials, and I got to play with a little bit of cloud stuff over the summer. And the first thing I figured out was opening up a workload in a cloud, making it accessible meant I had to open up some firewall policies. And yet to make it easy, I opened it up too far and actually increased my attack surface. So in my mind, a lot of the connectivity and security issues are perhaps linked together more than they should. That was my experience. Tell me about yours, because this is the world you live and breathe in.
I would agree. I mean, all of the major hyperscalers, at least, everything is usually denied by default.
Right.
So it's usually going to be a user error, or somebody did something, right? So you'll hear these news stories all the time of people getting hacked and the cloud provider's fault. It's like, no, not really. It's usually a person, had to make a change to make that issue be there. But again, it goes back to who's the user that's doing this, right? Because this is a different world, whereas the person who used to be the VMware admin is now running everything. They're doing networking, they're doing the
right.
User credentials and everything. So it's a different world, but it presents these capabilities to be able to have these connectivity and performance issues and things like that.
Yeah, I've been a server and storage guy for 31 years, and I never even pretended to be a networking person. And so when someone says, yeah, just open up the firewall so you can get to it, my presumption is all or nothing. And so I have been guilty of that as well. So with that in mind, let's go back to slide 3. Let's talk about those issues, because we talked about cost. There are reasons why the cloud could be more or less expensive. Let's talk about, I think it's interesting that security and compliance are side by side. I think that's interesting. And then arguably ease of management. You could make the case that administrative error is probably the biggest challenge there, as opposed to, just managing the cloud. Portals are pretty nice, but administrative configuration, I think, would be a challenge. Talk about when should a workload be cloudy or not when it comes to security and compliance stuff?
I think my take, again, being a cloudy guy, my take is that just about anything could be a cloud-based workload. Security and compliance, the reason why a lot of people go to these clouds is because they're so secure by default. Yep. They have all the certifications. They have all the FedRAMP, all the credential industry certifications. They have all these in place. So it's there. It's easy to. I won't say it's easy. It's there. It's flexible for you to be able to set it up. If you know what you're doing. And that's really the key there, is that a lot of people will go into the cloud because it's so easy, but they don't have that skill set, or they don't have the understanding of, if I make this change, what does it impact down the line? And that's usually where these issues arise.
Double click on that for me for a second. So sure. Especially relates to compliance, let's talk geo-sovereignty. Depending on what part of the world that you come from, in some cases people say, German data can't leave, the magic dotted line that is Germany, right? Or French or Australia, or, pick a sovereignty area. How does one, and this is not an area I'm familiar with, how does one ensure that data resides within a locality or a sovereignty? Where does that really come into a conversation with cloud?
So it does come into conversation. So again, being multinational companies, there's a lot of these times where the data may need to reside in Germany. For this example, let's say Germany, but the admins are being done, by SAs or people within the U.S., right? So they're not familiar with all these German laws and regulations that they have to do. But we'll take all that out of the mix. Let's just say, look at it from a cloud perspective. If you want to keep your data in Germany, there's regions, there's availability zones, there's data centers located in Germany. You can have your S3 buckets located in Germany, so you can try to keep all that data within a geographical location. But you can also create rules and firewall rules and web access rules that only will restrict that data, but access to that data from within those regions as well. So there are ways to go about keeping it within a physical region or location.
Got it. Okay, so we've spent we're about 20 minutes into our time, and for the most part, we've really just been talking about the production shifts in the cloud and how people need to be thinking about that. Of course, here at Veeam, we're a backup company, right? So let's take a look at slide 5. And we asked two kind of related questions around this idea. By the way, one of the things we did in this one, which I thought was a lot of fun, in a different survey instrument, we asked IaaS admins, so those folks that are running this production cloud, and they are your cloudy peeps, right? And then we asked traditional backup admins the same questions. And two things I thought were really interesting. It used to be, back when my beard was not gray and you had hair on top, way back in the day, there wasn't as much unity between the different IT teams, and you get different people thinking different ways about things. I was surprised how well IaaS admins and backup admins see the problems and the drivers for data protection the same way. Two things that come to mind. One, when asking about who's driving the strategy and the requirements for data protection, I was surprised the IT team trumps the data protection team by nearly 2-to-1. That's what the left-hand side says. And yet, on the right-hand side, the people that are actually doing the backups are typically still backup-y humans. Both sides agree that that's the side doing the backups, even though they aren't the ones defining the strategy for that. talk about, I mean, you've worked with a lot of organizations on both sides of the aisle here. What are your thoughts on this?
First of all, it's kind of interesting, right? But I think what it comes down to is that it's a culture shift. So when the traditional backup admin on-prem is now the IaaS admin, right? Because he's in charge of those workloads. He's in charge of creating them, managing them, making sure that they're being protected.
Sure.
Because it's a cloud-based workload. So now he's becoming both the IaaS admin and the backup admin because somebody has to do it. And that data needs to be protected, right?
That makes sense. So for the folks on the right, then on the right hand side, same individuals are protecting the on-prem backups versus the cloud backups. We got about 7 more minutes left. Put your Veeam hat back on. You've been great as an industry person, but put your Veeam hat back on. What do you want to tell those traditional data center backup admins about backing up the cloud?
Yeah, no problem. So, putting my Veeam hat on, not to go into a Veeam spill, but let me first take it from a cloud perspective. So each one of these hyperscalers has a well-architected framework, they call it. And that's very important to know. And basically what it's doing is helping an IaaS admin or helping anybody who leverages those clouds to know the best practices for how to set up things. Typically, it means least valuable access, the least amount of privileges that people need. And also, one of the big things there is setting things up so that they're highly available, redundant, and that data is being protected. The key point for me, of course, is the data is being protected.
Sure.
Just because something moves into the cloud doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be protected or somebody else is doing that. So that's why I'm seeing the IaaS admin doing it. And that's where products like Veeam come into play, where we have backup products for all of these hyperscalers that do protect those workloads natively to how they are meant to be protected in the cloud. Mm-hmm. We're leveraging those best practices. We're going through what's called WARs, well-architected reviews with AWS and Microsoft and Google to make sure that we're not only doing the best practice from a data perspective, but also best practice from an API and cloud perspective.
Okay.
So that's kind of the gist of it. But again, it's making sure that not only what we're doing is best for the data, but best for the cloud that it's in as well.
Got it. Okay, so let's stay on that for a second. Let's bring up slide 6. This might be presumably the last one we have time for today. So again, you've got data from 2020 looking at 2022, intermixed with 2021. Looking at 2023, so it gives us these nice 3 curves, and I think you'll have to you should answer as both a VCSP SME as well as an Azure and Amazon advocate, because I think you get both stories in this mix. Mm-hmm. So we asked organizations, what percentage of your day is being protected by which kinds of tools, and where do you think your primary backups are going to go? And what you see on that left-hand side is the idea of self-managed backup, which of course, Veeam loves that. Using all on-prem tools, we see a significant and steady decline of that, aspiring over that 4-year curve on the left. When we look at self-managed backup tools, but using cloud services, so I read that as Cloud Tier, Cloud Connect, but I'm still driving it with, say, our core flagship VBR product. That's the center. And then over on the right, cloud managed backup with a service provider, right? And so and both of those are obviously going up. So is the future of backup cloudy? Because that's what the data shows. What should we be thinking about as far as service providers and using cloud services overall? Where does the cloud fit in a data protection strategy?
So, I mean, it fits in the 2, right? The 3, 2, 1, but so 2 different data. But anyway, so where the cloud fits is again, it comes to that flexibility aspect of being able to get that data offsite much more efficiently than writing it to a tape, sending it to a bank vault or mountain or cave or wherever. But it's allowing you to do that in a more thorough manner. But the interesting takeaway on the slide for me is, again, the backup as a service provider. So the VCSPs, the MSPs of the world, those are always going to be around. I mean, MSPs have always been around for since IT was created. But what this enables is it's a lot easier for somebody to send. I'm going to send my backups to a MSP, and I also have somebody that I could talk to, somebody who can help me with other projects, help me with things. Whereas a lot of the hyperscale clouds, I can send them data, but yet it's going to be another third party that would provide services on top of those clouds. Whereas, a MSP is going to provide that cloud service themselves. They're going to be a lot more familiar with my environment. They're going to be more familiar with my data, and that provides another layer of service on top of that, right? So that's where that comes into play.
I really like what you said there. So a lot of times when we talk about the cloud, right, and there's not really there's a big asterisk and italics on that. But really often when we talk about service providers as part of data protection, we focus on the provider aspect, that there is a target out there that magically receives the data, and how wonderful is that? But I think you and I would agree that honestly, it's the service that actually matters. And I think another word for service in this case is expertise. Right. And expertise comes in a couple fashions. If you're talking about an MSP, that is empathy in your environment. They helped you build your environment. They know your data. They know your business. Who better to help you with recovery than that, including protection jobs? And I think also when we look at, say, like DRaaS providers, DR as a service, there is a kind of expertise that comes in business continuity disaster recovery planning that most organizations don't have on staff. And so having that depth of expertise there, I think, is huge for that. All right, so we got about 2 minutes left. I do want to give you the last word, but before we do that, I want to look at the map one more time. Looks like Pakistan is in the house, which is awesome. Malaysia, Dubai, so the Middle East really weighing in across the board, and India, so that's fantastic. Czech Republic, I don't know who it is from Czech Republic, but I don't think they ever miss. So thank you for joining that. We're back in the U.S. Looks like Jersey's in the house. I think that's Utah. Also is there along the way. So please keep the countries coming. We will try to reply back to these overall. And thank you for everyone who joined for today. Do want to give you a couple teases coming up. So typically on Mondays, we also tell you about the great stuff coming on Friday of that week. It's no longer coming on Friday, because our friends in Europe said, that's the end of my day. It's after 5 o'clock. I don't want to be on a webcast at 5 o'clock on Friday, and we get that. So now our Friday calls are actually now going to be Thursday live streams. So we're going to keep doing the industry insights on Mondays, and then our technology-centric ones are now going to be on Thursdays, still at that noon East Coast time. This week, our friends Rick Vanover and Melissa Palmer are going to be going through continuous data protection. We're going to look at the CDP functionality in V11. And so truly there is some elegance in the design and some really powerful outcomes that come out of that. So if you've been looking or needing continuous data protection, and you don't want to do storage, asynchronous and synchronous, and there's that other little company that keeps trying to do CDP, and people have been waiting for Veeam to do it. It's here. It's in V11. You should go check that out. So make sure to do that on Thursday. And then also Veeam 1. We are less than 30 days away from our annual user conference. We've got a whole bunch of breakout sessions, a lot of learnings and sharings to do. So please be on the lookout for registering for that. And we'll actually be highlighting that in a couple of the podcasts coming up over the next month. But Dustin, I am giving you that final word. Imagine that we are back in user conferences. This is the last 30 seconds. You've got a room full of IT decision makers. They're thinking about the cloud. They're tinkering with the cloud. They need better data protection. If you could just shake their shoulders and say, this is what you need to know, what do they need to know?
First of all, you need to know that Veeam has a product for that, right? So,
all right.
Again,
all right.
Yeah. So we have a product for that. It's free to try. They're in each major clouds in the marketplace. Give it a shot. Give it try it out. There's no cost. It's free to protect up to 10 instances. Check it out. One of the major things for IO or C level is that our policies, you can see a cost of to run a policy before you even run it. So check it out. Look at that and give it a go.
Sounds good. All right, big hands on the 6, and I promise we'd end on time. Thank you, everyone, for joining this week. We'll continue to answer that. Looks like we have one last question that just came in from Boniface on, do you guys have some courses? Yes, so we do have some courses, and our core flagship product has courses around how to use Cloud Tier and Cloud Connect. And then, do we have online courses yet for the Azure and Amazon native products? I think we do, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we should. Yeah, they're internally as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Again, thank you for joining us. Keep the questions coming. We will answer them in chats. And check the Thursday session, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye.